The people who are here, and we'll talk a little bit. I don't have a real good agenda for today. So originally we were going to have a leaders meeting tonight, I thought, and I messed up the schedule, and we were going to talk about it there, and I had some stuff kind of planned. We talk around tables and stuff. So we're not going to do that today because there's no tables, and it's the morning, and there's no leaders meeting tonight. We'll do the best that we can. So I'm going to share a couple of comments, and then I'll open up for you guys to ask questions a little bit, okay? So there's a reality in our community that churches are closed. Yeah, why don't we pass those out? Can you help me out? This is a document to help with some of what we're talking about, but as that's being passed out, there's just a reality I want us all to just accept because it's just true, that churches are closing in our communities. And not just here, lots of places. In our classes in the last several years, we've closed 5 churches out of 55. We've closed 9% of our churches in the last few years. In Jenison, if you go back about 5 years or so ago, there were 7 CRC churches in Jenison. There was Trinity, Alive, Ridgewood, Baldwin Street, First, Cottonwood, maybe there were 6. And 12th Avenue, thank you. Alive was a brand new church plant, so it was a brand new church. Today, First Jenison is closed. 12th Ave CRC closed in December. I've heard rumors that Trinity is merging with Alive. And Baldwin Street CRC is still open because the people who were left at First went to Baldwin Street, so combined they could keep Baldwin Street open. But how long are you going to last if all of your people are in their 80s? They're going to be down 4 churches in about a decade in Jenison. Over half. In our community, in Granville, it was about 10 years ago now. Is it 10 years ago that Olivet closed? Only about 10, I think. Yeah. So about 10 years ago they closed, and now there's Harbor Life is in there, and they're doing great, right? But there's a reality, a lot of our churches are struggling simply to stay open. We could add in Wyoming, Eighth Reformed, and Faith, and Grace, and Beverly, and eventually Newhall are all going to be in that boat soon, unless something major, drastic by God happens in those communities. There's just, and that is not a comment of any negative about those churches. It's just what's happening. So it is good for us to recognize that we're very lucky to be in a place that is doing well and is pretty healthy, because a lot of churches are struggling right now. Part of what that means is if you look at the churches that aren't struggling, they're mostly new church plants, and they're very focused on reaching people who are not already connected in church, and they're not program driven, they're relationally driven. So if you look at the churches doing well, they don't run a lot of programs. They run Sunday morning really well, and they get people connected in a relationship, and they try to reach people who don't know God, and that's what they do. They don't do lots of other stuff, and that's very intentional, because there's only so much time and energy, and if your neighbors don't know Jesus, you have to pick. Are you going to spend lots of time doubling up programming, or make sure your neighbors know Jesus? So when our consistory met back in September, we were all given a book we had to read a portion of called God Dreams that mapped out 12 basic typical visions that churches have. Is that fair, Jeremy? Pretty typical. And they were into 4 different categories, so 3 in each category, and then we had to rank which ones we thought fit Zion best. And then we met in small groups of like 4 people after going through history and some other things, and we kind of debated amongst each other about which 2 we thought best fit us. And then we came together as a big group, and we talked about which 2 best fit us. And what we decided on was that we believe God is calling us to one, I guess we could tentatively call geographic saturation. We think God wants to reach every person in our community with the gospel, and that we're called to be a part of that. It's not a particularly radical vision, right? I think Jesus had something to do with that in Matthew 28 when he said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teach them everything I commanded you. So we think Jesus was right, and because he's God, he gets to be. So that was the first thing. Second thing is that if we're going to do that well, we need to be a church that is about developing our people. One of the other things that's changed in our culture, if you go back 40 years ago, companies used to actually invest in their people. Some of you won't remember this, but there were like genuine training opportunities because they thought they should develop their people to become more effective in their jobs over time. Now, they don't do that typically. They just hire someone different, and you're stuck where you were, or you get let go. The one place where we think that can be different is at church, because we think people matter, not money. We think you matter. And so we want to invest in helping you be more effective in your home life and in your work life, but also here at church and in sharing your faith with others to be simply better leaders in whatever leadership role you might be in, whether it's as a parent or a grandparent or a Sunday school teacher or in your job. And we want to do that in part because if our church is growing and reaching people who don't know God, we also need to be raising up people who can mentor and disciple and lead small groups and teach Sunday school classes and do those things. And you're the people we have, so we should help you become the people who can do that. And if we reach enough people and we plant churches, we need to send some of you away. And so we need other people who can do what you do when you're not here. One of my favorite lines from our retreat was from Sarah McCannley, who said, can we stop helping other people plant churches again, and can we actually do it ourselves? Because we've helped plant, but we haven't sent our people, and she thinks we should send our people. I think she wants to leave. She was really passionate about sending our people, and it seemed like she was signing up to go. So that really is the core of our vision, that we think that we want to, in the next 7 years, we want to overflow with so many growing spiritual leaders that our communities, Granville, Georgetown, and since our retreat, I've done more mapping of where our membership is. We have pockets of members in Wyoming and in Granville and in Jenison and Hudsonville, and then a few scattered people in Hamilton and Holland and Caledonia. But most of us are in a couple in Kentwood. But most of us live in Wyoming and in Hudsonville and in Georgetown Township or Jenison or Granville. So we want to plant churches there. We want those communities to be drenched in gospel conversations. We don't think we'll convert everyone in the community because that's not our job, it's God's. But we want everyone to have heard about Jesus and had a conversation in which the gospel was presented in a way that's persuasive and compelling for them, with an opportunity to then be taught how to follow God. So we want to do that. And we think if you do that well, it will lead to new churches, in part because you'll bring more people in, and because if you really care about reaching people, you'll want to plant new churches. And there's lots of reasons why we could talk about. One of them is part of the reason people aren't in our church and we won't reach them very well is you probably like our church. That's why you're here, right? Yeah, the people who aren't here probably don't like what we're doing in our church. That's why they're not here. So if we change to what they like, you might all leave. Right? So it's easier to start a new church that can be the community that they want and need for them to be able to follow God better. It doesn't mean what we do is good or bad, or what they do is good or bad. It just means people are different. And so we will never be everything to everyone. We have to be who we are, but we can plant churches that can reach people we won't reach more easily. So that's our big vision. Tied to that, we have 4 3 to 5 year goals that we've set. Can we go ahead and slide, Ethan? Thank you. I dragged my son in to do our video, our projection stuff today. So 3 years from now, we are focused on developing what we're calling a leadership development pipeline. It is an intentional way to develop and care for and raise up you as leaders in our church. And Jeremy Zoot and Rachel Verbrugge and I are working very hard on that right now. We're hoping to be able to start unrolling some of that later this spring and throughout the summer. So next fall, people are moving through that. Some of you are in pilot programs. So Rachel Zondervan and Rachel Verbrugge and Sarah McCannley and Tammy Hewitt and Shanda. Not Shanda. I'm forgetting. Haley Stone are in a pilot program right now. We're going through some related curriculum. It isn't quite what we're going to do here. We're working through that together right now. So we're focusing on how do we develop our leaders to really help you share your faith and lead well, and some good, solid life skill stuff. Then we're looking at outreach. We just did an audit of our outreach ministries at our church that was eye-opening for some people and finally got other people to say what I've been trying to say but didn't have the right words for it. So someone else said it better than I was. We are phenomenal at benevolent outreach. So you think of hand-to-hand, Personal Care Pantry, Camp Zion, we are really good at helping people who have less than us. We are not good at evangelistic outreach, sharing our faith with people who are like us. And benevolent outreach is great. It is. You need to do that. It is wonderful and important. It is part of the gospel. But benevolent outreach is not going to bring people into our church or maybe into any church. Because if you think about, this was my insight from my younger sister who used to go to food trucks for her family, is she would drive by and she would see if any of her friends were volunteering that night at the food truck distribution. If they were, they would go hungry rather than have to go in line and admit to her friends that she needed help from the food truck. So if we're doing benevolent outreach, which is important, none of us would probably go to a church in which we had to come with our hat in hand and ask for a handout. That's never going to happen. There might be a few people who will come, but not many, because that's hard. It's humbling, right? When we first started doing Personal Care Pantry, people wondered, how come there are no men coming? And then we realized there were men coming, they just wouldn't leave their car because it was too hard to come inside, right? Because it's humbling. So benevolent outreach is phenomenal, it is important, but it is not evangelistic outreach. And we need to get better at how do we reach our friends and our neighbors with the hope that we have in Christ. So we're working on how do we start doing that more intentionally. We have some ideas, and I don't know if anyone on that team is in the room right now, so I won't make anyone go on the spot, but we're talking about that. We also recognize that we need to align our ministries and facilities to what we're trying to accomplish, which means we probably have to simplify some of what we do. We've been simplifying for a while. One of the challenges for most churches is that they are over-programmed and under-evangelizing. Because what happens is it's way easier for us to come to church and hang out with each other than to go do something that makes you hang out with your non-believing neighbor friend. It just is. And so what churches do is they have great ideas of fun things to do, and they keep adding them until eventually you're at church every day of the week, and you never have to talk to your neighbors anymore, and you don't have any non-Christian friends, so you don't feel obligated to tell anyone because you don't know anyone anymore. By the way, it actually is true. For most people who come to faith, they are phenomenal evangelizers for the first 6 months. And in those 6 months, they get connected in a church, and they get scheduled in the church, and within 6 months, they no longer have non-Christian friends, and they no longer evangelize because they don't know anybody who isn't. I was humbled at a meeting with the governing team for City Chapel a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. We talked about where we are doing personal evangelism right now. So I'm going to confess to all of you what I confess to them. I realized I don't have anyone in my life right now that isn't already a believer, other than one of my sisters who won't talk to us. So it's hard to evangelize when you can't talk to her. I used to. That's why I used to coach Science Olympiad with my kids, because I could hang out with people who don't go to church, and I love that. That was great. I need to make some new non-Christian friends. It's also winter, so my neighbor doesn't hang out with me anymore because it's winter and it's cold. But you have to be intentional about it, don't we? So we probably have to simplify some ministries. We also have some facility things of, even at our current size, you might have noticed our narthex is not quite big enough for us. We had an architect in a couple weeks ago, and he was here for worship and kind of hung out after and took pictures and that kind of stuff. Then he met with Pastor Rick and a few other people from Consistory, and his comment was, I see your problem. It's pretty obvious. We don't have enough gathering space in our church. That's why some of you sit in the sanctuary after church, right, to sit and talk, because there's no other place to go, right? And our kids programs, it's better now that some people aren't coming as often because it's winter and kids get sick. But when we were at our peak in November and December, we had two of our children worship rooms were really over capacity, and we don't have another space to go right now that will hold a children worship room. One of them is in a cruddy spot as it is, because if you're in the chapel, you can hear everything in the sanctuary the whole service, and it's very difficult for the kids. But it was the best option we had. So we are also looking at what do we need to do to remodel our facilities so that we can effectively do ministry here and continue reaching more people and have space for more people. Because right now, there are 3 pinch points for most churches for growth: the parking lot, children's ministry space, and the sanctuary. Our parking lot, we could grow to about close to 400 people before we would run into parking lot space issues. Our sanctuary, we can grow to about 360 in average worship. We've been averaging about 300 for the last 12 weeks. So we have some room to grow there. Children's ministry space is where we're tight for space right now, and we don't have any other place to go. So we're trying to, that's why we're talking to the architect, is we need some gathering space for adults, and we need space that works for our kids, because right now what we're doing doesn't have space for us to continue growing. The simple solution would be to just go to 2 worship services right now, and then we could have space for that, but our sanctuary would feel really empty, and then you have not enough people in the sanctuary, so it would feel awkward if you're visiting. So that we're trying to reach that point where we could go to 2 and have that work. So we're looking at how do we align ministries and facilities to that vision. Part of aligning ministries is, if the goal is to be planting churches, we want to be able to multiply what we're doing at a new church, and so it has to be easy to add to it. One of the challenges of Children in Worship, which is probably the best in-church children's ministry program out there, it is phenomenal. The problem is to launch a new one, unless you can find a set from another church that's not using it, that's in good shape, because it costs about $5,000 or several hundred volunteer hours to make one. And even then, it took about 50 to 60 hours of Rachel and I's time this summer just to get what we have. That's not that great yet, operational for this year. And it was throwing it together as fast as we could, plus help from Rory Lemon and Rick to get it all together. It doesn't multiply well. So what do we need to do in ministry so we can actually add and grow them without having to put in hundreds of hours to do that? Because right now, if we have to add another children worship room, we're going to have to pay $5,000 just to get the curriculum, because we can't find another church that will sell it. Per room, it's $5,000 and hundreds of hours of setup time to get it all organized. So it's not easy to multiply. So that's when we talk about aligning ministries. How do we have ministries that we can multiply as we grow and as we try to plant new churches? And then the last thing is, we're starting to look at, well, what would it look like for us to plant a new church? And it's fascinating to me. I'll share a story from this past week. This past week I was in Florida. It's my favorite week of the whole year, not because I'm in Florida, although that doesn't hurt. So it was, I was at the MC Squared conference. It's mission, I don't know what it stands for, but it's all churches, it's pastors of churches that plant churches in the CRC and RCA. It's by invite only. There are about 30 churches there this year. And one of the churches was Community Reformed, and they brought along with them a church plant resident they just hired, Andrew Moore, who lives right by West Elementary, who feels called to plant a church in Grandville. And so we're talking about what could it look like for us to help with him in that. Because he doesn't, I'm not sure what they're doing there, because he doesn't know anything yet. And they don't know anyone in Granville, so I'm going to help him make some of those connections. But those doors are opening. And then I mentioned the churches that are closing. Part of that reality also means there are church buildings that are empty. One of the most effective ways to plant churches right now that's cost effective is when one church closes, you plant a new one in it. The Bridge in Portage just planted in the old Twin Lakes Community Church just north of Kalamazoo. They planted the Voyage, and they're already worshiping 200 people a Sunday because they have a great facility and there's high visibility, and they adapted to do ministry in a way that connected with the people today that the congregation at Twin Lakes wasn't able to do. And that's true elsewhere. That's a very common model right now. That's why it worked for Harbor churches to plant at both the old River Tree building and at the old Olivet building, because there is space, and it's cheap space, because you can't sell a church for anything what it's worth, because no one wants it, because it's a weird building unless you're a church, right? What else do you do with it? You can make it into apartments. That's what people have found they can do with them, or make it be a church, so we can make it be a church again. So there are several that are probably going to be closing that we could be looking at in Wyoming that are near where some of you all live. So we're talking about multiplication. And then we have a one-year goal. Go ahead, one more. Thanks. Thank you, Ethan. We want to bring 100 people to go through a leadership development experience to learn how to better live and lead like Jesus. So that is going to be a combination of probably 1-on-3 mentoring and leadership skills sort of stuff, and then also using our leaders meetings a little more intentionally. So some of you who go to leaders meetings, you notice at the last one, if you were in a group, you probably had some very specific training for what you do that you did, and you talked with your people, and the person who led it and actually knew what they were doing ahead of time, right? Rachel Zondervan's nodding because she was one of them leading it. And we're being more intentional in how we use our leaders meetings to train people for the different areas of ministry that we're in. That will be part of that, and then bringing new volunteers will go through some very specific leadership development training experience over the summer and into the fall. And then we also have 4 90-day goals. These are our new goals we set for as consistory in January. So one of them is Rachel Brower is going to lead a team to do an audit and a redesign of our children's ministry so we can continue adding and growing it, because we're having some struggles with that right now with our current design. We're still working on a leadership pipeline, and we have some curriculum developed and we're working on some processes, and so that's going on. And then our one team is working with missions to figure out what can we do to train our people and to do more effective evangelistic outreach in our church. That is not always expensive. Our most effective outreach things that we do as far as evangelistic things go was we did a play date at our park last summer. Did anyone go to that? We had a bounce house, and we had food, and it cost us like $120, and it involved my wife and my kids and I setting up a bounce house and then tearing it down again. And that was about it. And then we played at the park. And there are 2 or 3 families currently attending our church because they were invited to the park play date by someone from our church, and they weren't going anywhere before. That's all it took. Because they were invited by someone who was a friend of theirs to come to something that their friend wanted to go to too, and they became friends with other people in the church, and they came. The other great outreach we do that we need to do a better job taking advantage of is our silly mini golf thing that Pastor Rick had the idea of a few years ago. I love mini golf. When he first did it, I thought, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And there are times I have to go to Rick and say, I'm the stupidest pastor you've ever worked with, because you're right, I'm wrong. Because it is the best invite for people who do not go to church. Because it's free, there's food. Winter sucks when you have little kids in your house. That's not an appropriate pastor word, but it's the word I chose. It's not any fun in the middle of January, and they're all going stir crazy, right? Preach it. Yeah, see, it's true, right? You just want to get them out of the house. And you can invite your friend who doesn't go to church. Do you want to go to my big church building and hit golf balls around with your kids? And they can come, and it's safe. And you know what we do when we do it? We intentionally get them in every single room in the church, so that if they come on a Sunday, they've already seen every space in the building, and it's now familiar to them, and that's why they start here. And we start them by the pulpit so that they get a sense that this is a safe place to be normal, even in our sanctuary. It's great outreach, but we have to be more intentional to invite our friends to come to it. And some of you did a great job of that this year. So that we're doing that. And then we signed a contract with Elevate Studios to design a remodel for our church, to give us better gathering space, and to figure out how to reclaim our basement so we can use that for children's ministry and get the right size rooms and be able to expand that as well. And so those are the things we're working on right now. At our April meeting, we'll come up with 4 more, and then we'll start sharing those regularly of what we're doing in each of them, and probably e-news and that kind of stuff. We're working on some communication things yet. So that's the kind of vision and what we're working on right now, and I'll open it up for questions, I guess. Is that fair? If you have any questions, I'm happy to do my best to make up an answer as best I can. Yeah, Teresa. Grace Reform just started hosting a plant with, this is terrible. The pastor is the pastor that we were starting to work with, who was going to plant at Lifeline Community Church, and he started worship services with 6 people, and it was not going to make it. So he didn't. There was no change in 6 months. We told him, we can't keep funding this if you're not doing the stuff we need you to do. So they are currently hosting. I don't know how that's going there. I'm hoping it's going better than it was when it was at Lifeline, because it wasn't going well then. They are hosting in their other building, Connections, which is led by George Grevenstuck. This is the coolest church plant. They intentionally targeted 250 houses all around Grace, and simply knocked on doors and invited them to come. They're so effectively reaching people with no church background that after they started worship, they had to stop. And this is why. No one knew what congregational singing was. So they had to teach them how to sing so they could sing songs together, because none of them had been think of in your life, outside of church, where do you sing with a crowd? Even when they sing the national anthem, does anyone sing it? Nope. Well, some of you do, but not very many, right? I sing it, but not many people do, and they kind of look at you funny if you sing it loud. You should stand next to me. I like to sing loud. They do look at you funny. Your kids tell you to stop. I've been singing quieter because my kids told me to stop. So I'm trying to be better. Not Ethan, he's so great. The other ones. So, but Connections is genuinely reaching unchurched people. It's phenomenal. They're doing amazing ministry. They're not going to be self-sustaining for any length of time. So if Grace doesn't stay open, something will have to be done with the building yet, because Connections can't pay for it. Yeah. 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 Yep. So one of the coolest things going on right now, I was talking about it last week with Toby Gruppen from LifeQuest in Zealand, is Holland has their first intentional Hispanic English language church plant. So one of the things that we as Caucasian people don't often think about is that it is true that there are Spanish-speaking Hispanic people in our community, but most of their kids are native English speakers. And if you don't have a church plant that fits their culture and their language, they won't stay. And so one of the challenges for a lot of our Hispanic plants is they're realizing they have to have an English language service. That's also true in the RCA for our Korean churches. They're having to now have English language services for the kids in the church because they don't speak Korean. And they don't want to speak Korean. And so they need to do that. So that is an interesting change that I think will continue happening in Wyoming too, that we'll stop seeing Spanish language plants and start seeing plants intentionally reaching Hispanic people who speak English, because that's going to be more and more common, understandably so. Yeah. So, but I've heard the same rumor, but I haven't verified it with Grace that they are meeting there, but I heard they are. But when I spoke with the pastor there, before he moved to Grace, there was almost no one attending, so I'm not sure how it's going. Yeah. That is too bad. Yeah. All right, let me ask you a question. What about the vision is exciting or intriguing to you or makes you a little freaked out? I'll take any of those. Yeah, for us. Okay. Wait a minute, Teresa. I had this terrible realization this summer that on our consistory, I'm the fourth oldest member. And when I came 14 years ago, I was the youngest member, and it's a little weird. If you were on consistory, you would be. Todd is currently the oldest member on our consistory, and Todd's still in his 50s. He's a young man. Yes. Oh, Rick is also, but Rick doesn't come to consistory meetings, but he's also on consistory. He's the oldest member. He comes to elders meetings. So, well, that is certainly true. Teresa, I still think I'm in my 20s. So, yeah, and then I run or play anything with my kids and I realize I'm not. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I'm going to let you in on another family thing for me. Last week, during Sunday school, I was talking with a member of our church, and I lost track of time, and my youngest child did not get picked up from her Sunday school classroom and was very upset and in tears because I always forget her. That is not true. I do not always forget her, but I have forgotten her to get her sometimes. So I have an alarm that goes off at 11:40. When it goes off, I'm leaving mid-sentence because I promised to be outside her door before the bell went off, whatever we're talking about. So we have like 5 minutes, 8 minutes. So any other comments or questions you want to share? Yeah, John. Me too. Thank you. Well, I think we're going in a good direction too. Thank you for that encouragement. Dave. That is a really good question. Why would we remodel? Because we're in this building, and this building doesn't work well for us right now in some ways. It works great in lots of other ways. It's a great building. But that's why. And we don't want to have to move to a different building. And the reality is for most of our older buildings, they're set up for ministry that was done really well in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's different now. One of the differences in children's ministry is in the 70s and 80s, yet you would have one adult in a room of like 5 or 6 kids. And now we don't do that anymore. We have 2 adults in a room, which means For volunteers, we need to have more than 5 or 6 kids. We have more like 8 to 10 in a room. So a room that comfortably held 7 does not comfortably hold 12. And we have some Sunday school rooms that have had 12 kids plus 2 adults in them this fall, and it was, I don't know what the right word to describe it is, but it was not pleasant. So, and I don't ever like it when I see people's faces when they're done teaching Sunday school and it looks like they want to never come back again. And I'm not going to name any names, but with some men who have had that look because they have a boatload of kids in their room. And they're doing a great job, but it's a boatload of Can you imagine like 12 boys in a room that comfortably holds 6 or 7? Yeah, for 40 minutes. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Yeah, so there's some reality. Our building was built great for what we did then. It doesn't fit as well for how you have to do ministry now. So, yeah, but that's a great question. When I talked with the pastor at the bridge that just planted in Twin Lake Community Reform's old building, and they said it was a bit of a stretch for them because before they could move in, they had to put $400,000 into the building to get it up, to fix the things that weren't working well, and to remodel it so they could use it for how they have to do ministry now. And that was the bare minimum to make that happen. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is, yeah, Elevate Studios is it's an architectural firm based here in Grand Rapids that is, they specialize in religious institutions. So they are the most highly recommended church architect in West Michigan and mostly the Midwest. They do stuff all over the country. When we were supposed to meet with one of them, he couldn't be there because he was in the Middle East doing work there. With a church in the Middle East. I think he was he in Bahrain? Bahrain. It's an RCA ministry he was working with in Bahrain. Yeah. So. That's a good question. That is a good question. So they will, Rick, do you have timelines on how long we're going to be working with them to come up with the plan? Wait. You have to say it into a microphone so that the people who are stalking us on video later, thank you. Hey, Ethan, can you unmute the wireless mic?
Our first meeting will be on Tuesday, and the timeline will be pretty aggressive. I don't know if it's on.
The red wireless.
Just need me to talk louder, is that?
No, because we want it picked up on it picked up on video.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it? You there? Hello? Test 1, 2, testing.
You're good.
Coming through?
Steve can hear you fine. He can no longer hear at all.
Oh, there we go. Okay. The timeline is going to be fairly aggressive. We'll be starting on Tuesday, and we hope by the end of May to have all things in place, hopefully things figured out, and then from that point what happens is the architect starts putting together all the information that they've gathered from the congregation, because we're going to include the entire congregation in this process, but ultimately the building committee will come with a recommendation to consistory to say this is what we recommend we need to do here, as this will best fit where we're at right now, given with the ministries and stuff. So probably by the 1st of June, we'll have not only some pictures, but we'll have a better idea of what it will look like. So, hopefully not. Hopefully not. The coolest part about this whole thing is, and we interviewed a couple of different architects, and they went through, and every one of them said, you guys got plenty of space, we just have to figure out how to utilize it better. And so they were wandering around, and it's so fun to watch because you can almost hear their minds just clicking as they're looking around and imagining what this could look like. So hopefully there will not be too much disruption taking place when it happens, but I also look at the fact that we were able, and I know that was summertime, but we were able to conduct worship services while this whole place was being redone. So I think if we can manage for a short period of time with that, we can do the same when we do this building project.
And we're not planning on doing anything in the sanctuary, so this room won't be changed.
Right. So, no, it's a special committee. There's 7 of us on there. Kyle Vanderpool, Andy Bosco, I got to get this right here now.
Don't risk
Brian Davis.
We'll put it in the e-news on Thursday.
Sandy Dunn, Arlen Zoot, Roxy Vanderhyde, and...
You.
Oh, yeah, me. Sorry.
You.
Like, there's one more. Who is that? It's me. So
We're also pulling together a capital campaign committee that is not formed, so I won't... Some people are on, but not everyone, so I won't list any names.
Yeah.
For that. Yes, because we'll need to raise funds for it, because you have to pay them. People like it when you pay them for their work. So we've already been in conversation with the Reformed Church in America Bank. It's not what it's called, but it's the bank. And they've looked through our books and finances, so we already have a promise of a loan from them and some basic guidelines on what we could afford. We want to keep the cost as low as we possibly can, because it's important to not spend money that we don't have and to spend, and I'll be honest, I don't like putting money into buildings. I'd rather put money into people. And we don't want to spend so much on our building that it hampers our ability to plant other churches too. So you can ask great questions if you want, but I have to leave because I made a promise. So thank you all for your time, and I apologize for leaving.
And I can't leave until you guys leave, so, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, if you have any other questions, and that was a very good question. We first thought about that because we've done that before where we've had the Building and Grounds Committee actually kind of oversee. That's what we did here with the sanctuary. But we felt with this one, it would be better to have representatives like Roxy, for example, representing nursery. And she can better explain to us the needs there because she sees it firsthand. And Kyle in youth, so we tried to keep it as diverse as possible. And then Arlen and myself on the upper end of the spectrum. So, but Sandy Dunn also, she's not only done the decorations for many years, but she's been here a long time. She's seen the changes as myself, and so she can also address some of that as well. So, Ben. That's a good question. Not really. Given the fact of where we're at, the numbers that we have here now, the numbers that we're dealing with, it's actually to do 2 church plants in the next, from this point now, it's almost 6 years, is pretty aggressive. And we also want to make sure that when we do this, we can do this. You know what I mean? Maybe you all have been there before. You've put out this goal, right? And it's a goal you can't reach, but you put it out there anyway. What's more hurtful to your progress than when you come to the realization you can't do it? So that's why we stuck with just 2 over the next 6 to 7 years. So does that make sense? Okay. Yep, go ahead. Oh, well. Get your ride there, yeah. The Uber lady isn't here right now, so. Anybody else have any questions? Hopefully I can answer. If not, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of excited. I think this is going to, it's going to be fun to watch. And, you mentioned a part of, are we going to be disrupted and stuff? Maybe somewhat, but there's a certain element. I just look back when we did the sanctuary, which is now almost 12 years ago. There's a certain element when you see the changes taking place and you come each Sunday, you check it out, and you go, yeah, this is my church. This is pretty cool. and you'll get to see the progress. So, like I say, I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited for it. I think God's got some great things in store for this place, and the future holds promise, and especially with God leading the way. So, all right, guys, have a great day. Buckle up. We're getting some good weather tonight, and thank you.